Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, gang. All right, so welcome to the second video for the week. There will only be one video for next week because of the midterm exam. So let's jump straight into it, shall we? All right, so for this video, we are going to be talking about the context of Algeria. Get my face over there. So again, as always, key terms and hard words. Now, unlike Ireland, it's going to be much easier to put the relationship between Algeria and France into a colonial context because of not only the continental divide, because remember, Africa is a continent, not a country, but also the racial divide. We can more easily see Algeria as being colonized by France. Not only that, we have a European power, France, taking away a province from another power, in this case, the Ottoman Empire, and eventually incorporating it into France itself. Now, don't worry, we're not going to do a deep dive into Algerian history like we did with respect to England and Ireland, but it is important to look at Algeria as it was under the Ottomans, then under French rule, and then next week we're going to look at Algerian independence. So first, we're going to look at Ottoman Algeria, 1529 to 1830. Now, Algeria under the Ottomans was an interesting beast. It was technically part of the Ottoman Empire, as we could see on this map here. Algeria, part of the Ottoman Empire. But it also exercised a fair amount of independence from the empire. This was primarily due to the distance between Constantinople, known today as Istanbul, and Algeria. Now, Algeria comes under Ottoman control, not so much due to Ottoman expansion, but rather through the expansion of Ottoman citizens. In short, Ottoman privateers, that is pirates, seized the city of Algiers and requested official Ottoman support in 1529 to ensure against incursions from the Spanish and the French. And so in exchange of an oath of fealty, an oath of loyalty to the empire, and being allowed to govern the territory while obviously paying taxes, they get the protection from the Ottomans. So the people who take Algeria and Algiers say, yes, we will be loyal to the Ottoman Empire. We will pay taxes. You guys come in, help us govern the territory. And in exchange, you got to protect us to make sure that we aren't kicked out. And so the Ottomans follow through. They supply 2,000 troops and enough artillery to protect Algiers. And so the leader of the Algerian province, Beys, B-E-Y, there we go, B-E-Y-S, not like Bay, B-A-E, but Bey, B-E-Y. Commander is another way of saying it. They ruled along the Mediterranean coast and focused on the cities. So cities like Algiers became a major trading outpost under control of the Ottomans, which left it a tempting target in the Mediterranean. And so as the fortune of the Ottoman Empire ebbed and flowed, so too did its direct control over Algeria. Particularly in the 18th century, that is the 1700s, the Ottoman Empire started suffering a string of defeats at the hands of the Europeans, and growing nationalist movements in its European holdings, particularly Greece, Romania, etc., forced the Ottomans to focus more on the Ottoman heartland, that is this area here, rather than on North Africa. And so with less direct Ottoman control, the Beys resorted to their old standby and engaged in piracy throughout the Mediterranean to help fill its coffers. And it was a relatively lucrative affair, as ships were seized by these Algerian privateers and then held for ransom. Now, Algeria itself, during this period, 1529 to 1830, could almost be seen as two separate territories within the Ottoman province. Now, on the one hand, you have the coastal areas, and I'm going to use this map even though it talks about the French. So we have the coastal areas, pretty much from this line on north. These were the coastal areas directly controlled by the Beys, directly controlled by the Ottomans. In these areas, Turkish was spoken in the written language, and the Ottoman law held sway. On the other hand, you had the more southern territory. This territory involved the Sahara Desert. You had oases throughout, around which towns and civilization developed. In this southern territory, the Beys had little direct control, and the day-to-day government, what government there was done on the tribal level. And so I'm going to go to the key terms. Because there was little by way of urban areas, with most of the people belonging to the Bedouin tribes, Bedouin, the Bedouin tribes. The Bedouin were and are a semi-nomadic people. They're migratory tribes who followed the goat and camel herds along the northern rim of the Sahara Desert. Now, the Bedouin had a dual focus. Number one was family relations, and number two was religion. Now, the Bedouin dealing primarily with oral history that is spoken and brought down from generation to generation. It's important for a Bedouin person to be able to trace one's ancestry back, in some cases, hundreds of generations. Because the lineage of a person brings prestige to the individual, brings prestige to the family, and allows for strong communal ties between different branches of the family, even if they're from different tribes. The bond between family is strong, which means at the same time, insults to one's family and insults to one's honor are taken very, very seriously. In fact, sometimes to the death. So politics, therefore, are done on the familial and the tribal level. We work together because we are part of the same family, and strangers should be shunned. Now, what kept the Bedouin at least affiliated with the Ottoman Empire? Many Bedouin tolerated the Ottoman Empire at the best of times, was the shared religion of Islam. Because during the Islamic expansion westward, I'll go back here, during the Islamic expansion westward, encompassing all the way up to the Iberian Peninsula, many Bedouin tribesmen converted to Islam, or at least they professed that they converted. And so as a result, many followed along with the Ottoman Empire, more so because of the Ottoman Empire's the Ottoman emperor's position as the religious leader, the caliph, Caliph. So not only the Ottoman Empire, the political ruler, but as caliph, he is the religious leader of the greater Islamic community. So we sort of see two different areas, two different worlds almost, between the direct control along the coast, where Turkish is a spoken and written language, and the Bedouins along the southern area and along the northern rim of the Sahara Desert. Now, let's talk about France and Algeria, but before we go into France taking over Algeria, I want to briefly talk about some of the reasons behind French and French expansion in particular, European expansion in general. And what I want to talk about is this idea of mercantilism. Because mercantilism is a prime economic theory operating out of Europe between the 15th and the 18th centuries. What's mercantilism? Why? Thank you for asking. It is the prime economic theory operating out of Europe between the 15th and the 18th century. Mark, what is mercantilism? Well, mercantilism, the prime economic theory operating out of Europe between the 15th and the 18th centuries. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge, wink, wink. And so mercantilism is based on the idea of a finite, a limited supply of wealth in the world. And so the various nation states economically compete against one another on this basis. That is, economics is a zero-sum game. If one person gains, gets +1, therefore by definition, everybody else is at a -1. +1 minus 1 equals 0. Hence, this idea of a zero-sum game. Wealth is only acquired at the expense of someone else. So if Spain, for example, is gaining in wealth, then other countries like Great Britain and France are by default losing in wealth. Now, mercantilism had 3 principles. First and foremost, maintain a positive balance of trade and payments. What does that mean? Well, it means you export, you sell more than you import, than you buy. I mean, it makes perfect sense if you look at our day-to-day life. We need to constantly make sure by the end of the month, we bring in more money than we send out. Bills like rent, phone bill, internet, food, always making sure we have at least a little more that we bring in than we send out. And again, there's focused on this limited supply of wealth. So by always making sure you bring in more than you send out, it means it's necessary to try and gain or hoard as much of the wealth as possible. So you can think of countries operating under mercantilism kind of like dragons. They're like Smaug. And so think of this idea of a dragon just swimming, sleeping on his pile of wealth. Or you can think of it as Scrooge McDuck diving in his bin full of money. Principle number 2, acquire colonies to benefit the imperial countries. Because colonies provide raw resources, you bring in things like wood, we manufacture the wood into furniture, we sell the furniture to other people, maintaining a positive balance of trade and payments. But they also provide a market for manufactured goods. And because they provide a market, this means you need to possess and project international power through a strong army and strong navy. You need to protect your colonies, you need to protect your markets, and you need to protect your trade routes. Wealth equals power. So the wealthier that your empire was, the more powerful it was, which means the government needed to control the economy to ensure the continued accumulation of wealth. Now, colonialism is tied intrinsically to mercantilism. Because without colonies, the mother country won't have a market, won't have a secure place to get its natural resources from, and it wouldn't have a secure market to sell finished goods. And so by the 19th century, by the 1800s, even though the economic theory of mercantilism is seen as passé, it is still very much involved in the undergirding, in the foundation of politics between nations. Because every major European power did not want to be left behind. So if one country was gaining with respect to colonies, colonies were seen as a primary means of gaining wealth, gaining power, gaining prestige for a country. Then everybody else was being left behind. By the 19th century, Great Britain was in the lead with respect to colonization, and the other major European powers were playing catch up. Which brings us to France and Algeria. Now, France invaded Algeria in 1830 with the initial intention of a punitive expedition. France wanted to punish Algeria for a diplomatic slight, but France ended up staying. So what ends up happening is, we see here on the left, French politician comes to negotiate with the Algerian Bey, and the Algerian Bey basically feels insulted, so whisks the French politician across the face with a peacock fan. French politician comes back, slices on the face. Oh mon Dieu, what happened to you? Well, I was over in Algeria, and they whipped me across the face. Government goes, oh my God, that is such an insult. We must go in and punish them. Zut alors. So they go in, as we see on the right. They seize Algiers, and once they seize the major city of Algiers, they more or less move in and start establishing a colonial presence. Because France was worried that if they moved out after they seized Algiers, well, then England or Spain or another power would simply step into the power vacuum. So 1830, France seizes Algiers. 1831, seizes the port city of Oran. 1832, port city of Annaba, and basically started shifting control southward. Effectively absorbing the northern territory of the Algerian province, France sets up its own system of government. For establishing the French presence, they set up the position of Governor General. Now, this is not like the position of Governor General like we think of with respect to Canada, where the Governor General is essentially a rubber stamp for any laws. The position of Governor General in Algiers for the French was a combination of civilian military post that reported directly to the Ministry of War in France. So civilian military rule was sort of set up. At the same time, a joint stock style company was set up. So a joint public-private venture to sort of mitigate the cost, mitigate the risk of colonization. Is set up to encourage French immigration to Algeria. And as I said, a joint stock company is a combination of public-private company where money is put up by the selling of shares. And so the French government would subsidize a portion of travel for individuals, a portion of travel for families, with the goal of transplanting the families from urban areas, either in France or urban areas already in Algeria, to set up plantations in Algeria to try to set up cotton plantations. So these are different plantations from what we saw in Ireland. These plantations for France are the economic ones, where they're trying to set up cotton plantations to start exporting cotton from Algeria to France. So this way they don't have to go to Egypt or India, controlled by the Ottomans and the British, respectively, to buy their cotton. Now they're producing it themselves, because Egyptian cotton was just starting to make inroads in the market, and France was trying to hope to get into the market. By 1848, you have about 100,000 colons. Now, what is a colon? C-O-L-O-N-S. These are white European colonists. Now, why is 1848? 18 years after France first steps in. Well, what's important? Well, in 1848, changes in France led to changes in the status of Algeria. Because as part of the 1848 French Constitution, Algeria loses its status as a colony. By 1848, as we see on this map, basically this area here up to the coast is part of French rule. So in 1848, Algeria loses its status as a colony. France goes to Algeria, you're no longer a colony. Algeria's going, oh, this is great. Woohoo! Thanks. France goes, but you're now an official department. An official department, what does that mean? It means, to put it in a Canadian context, Algeria becomes a new province for France. So just like we have 12 provinces and 10 provinces and 3 territories, it would be like if hypothetically the US wasn't looking, we took over Maine. The Mainers went, yay, we're part of Canada. Bring us some healthcare. And then we go, okay, congratulations, we are making you, Maine, a province of Canada. That's what it means by becoming a department. Just think of it as a province. Algeria being the only, quote, overseas department means that Algeria is an official part of France. Even though, we'll look at this map, even though Algeria is across the Mediterranean from France, it's not connected. France and Algeria is considered one political entity. Now, what does this mean for les colons, the white European colonists in Algeria? Well, colloquially, they are referred to in both Algeria and France as les pieds noirs, black feet. So I'm going to refer to them as les pieds noirs. So what does it mean for les pieds noirs, the colons, the white colonized people in Algeria? Well, they become official French citizens. And what this does in Algeria, is it creates a larger divide between les pieds noirs, who are generally white and European, and the indigenous, typically Berber, generally non-white population. And so les colons will take a majority of the political positions within Algeria. There will be token positions for the Berbers, and maintain a monopoly on the economics of Algeria. Now, for the most part, as we can see from this map, French control exists only in the northern part of the territory. Similar to the Beys and the Ottomans, you find limited control in the Bedouin-controlled areas. The French will tend to use greater military force in trying to extend their reach with the southern territory, tending to remain under military control. So this area here, so we'll say up to 1890 with Gardea, Wargia, Insala, and Adrar, they will kind of remain under quasi-military and civilian control. Everything north of this line, so 1870 on up, will be civilian control. Quasi-civilian and military, completely military control. So, stop sharing. This is going to be a relatively short one because you guys will be having the midterm exam next week. So I'm going to stop talking here. That is the context for why the Algerians are going, I'll get the mouse out of my face, why the Algerians are going to start revolting against French rule and leading into the use of terror. So I'm going to stop talking here. I'm going to let you guys go forth, slay dragons. Midterm study guide will be up Thursday or Friday, and I'll see you guys in the next video. All right, take care. Bye.